Fans of the Horus Heresy, thank you very much for joining me for a quick how-to video. And in this video, I'm going to do a little demo on how to fix mold slips on Forge World models. So this is a slightly sensitive subject because what I am in effect going to do in this video is fix a couple of parts that are arguably faulty. One of them very definitely is, and I would normally have it replaced. As a demonstration of what you can do, I'm going to just do this little video just to show you a couple of tips and tricks for how you can deal with some of these issues. Right, so the kit that we're working with today are these chaps, the Aquilon Terminators with Infernus fire pikes. So these are due for release in a few days time. I picked these up at the August open day at Warhammer World, and safe to say this kit has needed a lot of work so far. So just to give you an idea, these are all the components you can see in front of you. These parts here on the left are the parts that didn't require any repair or filling. These parts here on the right do, and as you can see, there is probably 2/3 of the parts have required some filling work. Most of this is due to the fact that there are a lot of air bubbles in this particular kit, so that suggests that the production cycle wasn't long enough to get all the air bubbles out. Now, one of you guys actually asked for this, Rob McCord, and when I was doing the unboxing, I came across this fault here, and you can see that there is a mold slip that runs across this diaphragm perhaps, or this articulated joint, this soft material in this joint on the inside of the custodian's knee. I'm going to clean that up. And then the second thing is, this is a pretty bad mold slip here. So this should be smooth here. And there's probably, I don't know, maybe about 1/10 of a millimetre displacement there, maybe a bit more. And on a part of this size, that's pretty bad. And you can see here we've got rivet details, you know, it's just well out. That's not very good, but we're going to, I'm just as a little demo going to have a go at fixing that, just to show you what you can do if you're so inclined. Also, you know, if you're so inclined with bits like this, send an email to Forge World and ask for a replacement because that is a fault. Let's do a quick chat down on the tools. There's only a few tools we need for this particular demonstration. Sharp knife, or sharp scalpel, blunt scalpel. We might need this, a needle file, flat underside, tapering to a point and a curved upper, and then a bridle spike as well. Good old friend dusty brush. I've also mixed a small amount of milliput epoxy filler, and we'll be needing this as well. We'll start with the legs. So let's just take a look at what we're dealing with here. What we've got is a mold slip running across this joint, and you can see the ribs, or whatever we call them, have been displaced, and it's quite a large displacement. Now, if I were to cut on both sides to get it to line up, I'd end up with a very thin piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm only going to clean up one side by cutting material away, and then I'm going to fill in the cavities or the voids on the other using the milliput. So that's the basic principle of what I'm going to attempt to do here. So let's go. So I've got the sharp scalpel. I'm just going to start by cutting out that material. Got to admit, these custodians have been a bit disappointing in terms of the quality on the kit. It's been a while since I've had a kit. Well, no, it hasn't actually, so I did return a Sikaran Punisher because it had too many faults on it. But still, in general, I feel Forge World casting quality has been improving. In general, they're still kind of inconsistent, but generally, and on average, I've been having a better experience this year than I think I had last year, which is good. And the next model that I'm going to feature, the next new model I'm going to feature on the channel, it certainly looks to be a very nicely turned out model. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. So well, let's just dust that away. Now let's have a look. So you can see there I've done a bit of cleaning. And on the upper side of the fins, we've got a decent profile, but on the lower side, we've got these kind of gaps, and it's on the lower side. I'm going to put the filler in. While we're at it, let's just clean this bit up here. So you can see the mould slip continues onto this detail. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to sand this down, and I think that will blend in just fine. One of the good things about working in resin is it's very easy to hide faults away, things like this, in a way that is harder to do on plastic miniatures, because resin files and cuts so well compared to plastic. I mean, plastic is not the best material to sand, and certainly the sort of plastic that Games Workshop uses for its models, which, you know, and this is a compromise in terms of the materials they want, isn't the easiest material for sanding and getting a smooth finish on. Some plastics that other model kit makers use are easier to work with. So generally speaking, I found the harder these injection plastics are that are used for model kits, the easier they are to sand. And I certainly found that working on Bandai models, the hard plastics on their kits are much more sandable than the soft plastics. There you go. So I've pretty much vanished that, and you can't even tell it was there really. Just going to do this little notch here. I'm going to cut that out and blend it into the form of that upper leg armour. This is one of those things in the hobby that I guess there's no substitute for practice and experience. You know, you just got to try these things and do them over time and build your skills up. I've never been trained or anything, or done this as what you might call a full-time job. Although I've done some commission work over the years, but certainly it's essentially a self-taught skill, isn't it? That's looking better now. A little bit more work. Not bad. Take a little bit away there. I think that's actually just a turning in there, so just clear that out. A little bit more work here on this fin. I mean, part of what you do with this is you kind of, you look at your fault and you kind of, I imagine what it's going to look like, or I kind of imagine in my mind's eye what it's going to look like if I do a particular technique, and I'll play that through a couple of different ways in my mind's eye until I settle on the technique that I think is going to work the best. It's getting there now. Right, I think we'll put some filler in here. Now this is only going to require a very small amount of filler to work. I always tend to end up mixing way more milliput than I need. Well, I tend to mix two quantities of milliput, either way too much or too little. I can never seem to find that happy ground in between. The great thing though with milliput is it's so cheap it doesn't matter. Certainly for the quantities you're working at when doing miniature modelling. Green stuff, on the other hand, particularly if you buy from Games Workshop, is a substantially more expensive product. So that's why I use for filling applications, which is most of what I do, and packing, I use milliput because it's much more cost effective. If you buy your green stuff, or shall we call it the needetite to use its correct trade name, if you buy that from other locations, you can get it at better value, and you can also get it in separate strips as well, which will improve its shelf life. One of the problems you've got with green stuff, the way that Games Workshop sells it, is you get two strips that are joined, and so within the centre of that you've got a reaction point where it will begin to set, and inevitably you then have to cut that out once it's got spent a certain amount of time in your collection. Another thing I've heard of green stuff is to store it in the fridge. I don't know enough about it. My brother-in-law, who sculpts his own model range, once said to me that he stores his green stuff in the fridge to keep it fresh. I suppose it's a cooler environment, so slow reactions, perhaps. Yeah. Makes sense. Maybe there's something else going on there. Just wanted to try put a bit more filler in here. Just there. So let me have a go at that. If you've not already seen it, I posted the latest episode of Retro Hammer yesterday. So if you've not watched that, please do check it out. I'm quite pleased with how that one turned out. And it's looking at the Castellan robot from the original Rogue Trader game. But I also got on a bit of a journey with robots in 40k. And basically try to look at the, well, as I've called it, the rise, the fall, and the rise of the robots, because that's very much what has happened. And I'm pretty happy with that now. A little bit to put in down here. Careful not to knock out any of the bits I've put in. Again, I mean, I just use it, this just shows with practice what you can do. I'm using incredibly cheap and simple tools here to do this. It's just a practice bit. And I've never, even when I started out, I never bought expensive tools to do this with. I just worked with what I had. I think I'm pretty happy with that. Maybe just a little bit more filler in one place. Just here. There we go. Just put a little bit more there. Let me shape that up. I mean, arguably you could, you might find doing this with green stuff a bit easier because of how it works, but as I say, it's just it's a cost thing. So if I buy green stuff, even if I keep it in the fridge, it won't get used much, and then it just goes off. Plus, as I've talked about many times, Miller puts a much better material for sanding and doing post-filling work. There you go. So we've gone from having a really unsightly mould slip there to a rather handsome looking joint and something that won't stand out at all from the rest of the model. So there you go, Rob McCord, how to put that mould slip right. Now let's move on to the less pleasant of the two tasks, which is dealing with this horrendous slip here. Good Lord, right, where do we start? Now, when you've got displacements of this magnitude, you've got to be careful about what you cut down, because you don't want to obliterate other details or merge details. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try cut this flange off first and cut it flush, because I think we can take that away and still preserve the form. There we go. And now, I mean, I suppose this is another thing. I mean, I don't know what people think about the use of what you like to use as a knife for this sort of work. I mean, I've used a lot of different hobby knives over the years, certainly in my younger years. But I settled on the scalpels probably by, once I sort of got into my late teens, early 20s as my preferred tool. And I think it's just the sheer precision you get with using a scalpel. I like this one, this metal handled one. Before this, I'd used a lot of these plastic ones, which, are great and they do the job, but they're disposable and over time they cost you more. So I decided to have a go with a metal one so I can just buy replacement blades. And to start with, I found that the handle was a bit slippery. As you can see, it's metal. It's well finished, it's nicely turned out. A bit slippery and quite heavy, but over time I've actually come to rather like it, because I guess the thing with the weight is it just feels a bit firmer and surer in your hand. And it also, from an ergonomic point of view, when you're using it, it warms up to the temperature of your hand, which is really quite pleasant. A little bit more to just deal with there. What you can do with resin as well is you can recut details quite easily. Right, so that's that bit. Now let's deal with this monstrosity of a mould slip here. I'm going to try cut some of it down first, and then I think I'm going to cut some of it down and then fill the remainder in with filler. I've got to be very careful not to catch these two rivets. Very careful indeed. Because those will come off faster than you can say. A golden swear word. Maybe we can do this all with cutting down. So if I cut it down, I'm going to have to smooth it back in to the shoulder pad. Not the shoulder pad, the gauntlet. All the time here, I'm being very careful not to damage the stud details. I think I might have got to a point there where I don't want to cut any more away, and I'm going to go for a bit of filler. Now this will require further work still, because once this filler is set, it'll then need some final shaping and filing down just to get it all smooth and looking as if it was, well, basically not there in the first place. I suppose that's what we're trying to achieve here, isn't it? Interested to hear in the comments if people, if you didn't get the opportunity to go to the Forge World Open Day, are people planning on getting any of the Aquilon Terminators, if I can say it right? If you collect custodians. I think they're nice models. I've got quite a bit of work to do, I think, to repose them, because I'm not overly keen on the stock poses with these guys. I think they look quite ungainly. So maybe that's something for another video, to just show you some reposing on these guys, because I want mine to look a bit more dynamic and less wooden, which is always a challenge of Terminators, because Terminator armour is inherently clumsy and bulky. That's why it's a good challenge though. Nearly there with this. That should give a nice video length as well for you guys and girls. There you go. So that will need a little bit of final filing once this filler is set, but that's recovered okay actually in the end. It's not too bad. Bit of a pain having to do the work on it in the first place, but nonetheless, there we go. And the rest of the mould slip that goes around here, well, that will clean up. I'll do that at another date. So Rob McCord and the other people who asked for this little demo, I hope you found this useful to watch and it's helped you out with giving you ideas around doing this sort of cleanup. If you've got any questions or comments or ideas for other little demos, please do leave them as usual. I'll be very interested to hear. But other than that, I'd just like to say thank you very much for watching. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.